What motivates us? What motivates you to get up in the morning and do what you do, to get out the door, to do your work, to earn a living, the particular field in which you find yourself, the career you've chosen, uh, to get in your car and drop your kids to where they're going, ferry them around the place to all the games that they go to and all the rest. What motivates you? What lights your fire? That's what we're talking about today and over the next 3 days. We're on day 5 of 30 days of mental skills. I'm Larry McGuire from humanperformance.ie, and I'm talking for the next 3 days about motivation. And you'd wonder, what could you talk about over 3 days? Well, we're doing it in short snippets, 10 to 15-minute clips, and talking about a particular aspect of one of these 9 skills of peak performance. These 9 skills, as per Dr. Jack Lessick, sports psychologist, renowned sports psychologist from the US, are fundamental to peak performance. But not only peak performance, they're fundamental to health and wellness and living a life worth living. You don't have to be a superstar. You don't have to be, a world beater. You just want to do what you do it well, enough so you can have a meaningful and purposeful life and make a few bob in the process. And I believe that all of us can have that. Why not? Now, there are lots of environmental factors, but by and large, I would suggest that a lot of this boils down to how well or otherwise we are motivated to do what we do. So, in particular, today I want to talk to you about self-determination theory and what it has to say. Now, I'm not going to get into the boring kind of academic stuff here. I'm talking about the right now, in the moment living of life and what it takes for you and me to get going. So there's a traditional view, and it's existed for a very long time, um, and it suggests that if you want somebody to do something, you have to motivate them by giving them something, a reward, or motivate them by threatening to take something away. So rewards and punishment. This idea has been around for a long time. Think of any authority that has an influence over the lives of human beings, and you'll know and you'll see how they act this out. Think about speeding fines. Think about the penalties for not doing what you're supposed to do, filing your tax returns, and so on. You're going to be punished. We've learned this from the days we were in school. We've learned this from religion. You know what they preach. Religions preach that if you don't do what God wants you to do, well, you'll be punished and sent to hell. Of some form of hell, regardless of the religion that you want to look at. Perhaps Eastern religions are more mature about this kind of thing, but by and large, most Western religions will suggest that if you don't do it as you're supposed to do, if you don't follow these rules and live your life how we say, well, you're going to pay the price eventually, and perhaps for eternity. Okay, so the threat of punishment is always there. Behaviorism, which was a movement that kind of gathered a lot of steam in the early part of the 20th century, late 19th century, with Ivan Pavlov, and you probably heard of Pavlov's dog, and salivation and all the experiments that he did, and subsequent theorists such as B.F. Skinner, who was really the center pin of this behaviorist idea. He suggested that human beings are motivated and develop because of contingencies in the environment. In other words, if I put my hand on the stove, my hand is going to get burned, and so therefore I learn not to put my hands on the stove anymore. So this has been a dominant view for a very, very, very long time. But there is another opinion or another view, and it suggests that you and I can be self-motivated. And I think if we look at the lives that we live, that we can see this in action. There are activities that we love to engage in that we don't need any threat from some outside party to execute. We don't need any rewards to engage in these activities. We do them because we love them, or we do them because we feel an obligation, because our value system is aligned with whatever it is, or yeah, that just about captures it. So when I think about my own work and my life, I train kids in sport because I want to do it. I'm drawn to do it. Now, sometimes it's a bit of a drag, but I know when I get there, I love to get going and get the training session going. And I love to see the lads engaged and uh, for the work that I do there in sport with kids to have an impact. So that's valuable to me. It aligns with my philosophy. So I go and I do it and I get the balls and I lay out the training session and I do what I do. And I go to the gym and I train the lads in the gym. I'd love if there was more of these fellas coming to the gym. But the few that do go, I enjoy showing them the sessions and I'll go out my way to get there. So this is stuff that aligns with my value system. So I go and I do it. There's also other stuff like recording this material um, and teaching. And all those things, all these things, like uh, they pay me a living, they allow me to live and pay my bills and so forth. I still enjoy doing them. And something happens though, I've found, when I'm forced to do something, when um I'm not really totally tuned into doing this thing, but I have to because someone else might have something to say if I don't do it, right? So we've all experienced of that in our work. And so this idea of self-determination theory, let's get to the crunch of it. Self-determination theory suggests that there are three core components to healthy functioning and successful living, and the successful doing of whatever it is we're doing, whether it's sport, whether it's you're in the military, whether you're in medicine, whether you're a teacher, a street sweeper. It doesn't matter what you do, whether you're a coder, grow vegetables, whether you're a painter, whether you love to write. There are three components that, if they're present, we will flourish. Okay, so that's really what we're talking about: flourishing well-being. So those three things are competence. So I feel competent. I have a degree of self-efficacy around this work that I'm doing. I feel like I have the knowledge, the skills, the ability, uh, and experience to carry out this job, this work, to do this task. Or let's refer back to mindset, which I covered in the first couple of sessions. A growth-oriented mind suggests that if I don't have those knowledge, skills, abilities, experience, and so on, well, I can learn, right? So autonomy, pardon me, we get to that in a sec. Competence, I have the knowledge, skills, abilities, and so on, and if I don't, I can learn them. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing is autonomy. Just jumping the gun there. So autonomy is I feel that I have control over the work that I'm doing. I have some say in how this work is done, how I get from A to B, and I relish the challenge of being able to get in and get stuck in and do this thing. So it doesn't matter whether it's a hobby, whether it's a social initiative, whether you're with a sports club and it's volunteering, or whatever happens to be, or whether you're in paid work or you're building a business. That sense of autonomy and feeling that I have some control and influence over how this work is done and the direction of this work, well, I'm in a good place. I'm likely to be in a good place. And you might remember I was speaking about this in some senses the other day when I was talking about locus of control. So, do I have the sense that I can impact the world? Well, we're kind of talking about the same thing here, all right? So, autonomy, a really important element of flourishing well being, right? In work, in sport, in play. And the third component is relationships or relatedness, according to this idea, self determination theory. So, relatedness is that I'm connected with other people who love what they're doing as well. So, I'm in a business or I do a job with other people who support one another in the job. Or I'm in a social community where we're all contributing towards the well-being of our children or our old people or whatever happens to be, or we're in a club and we're all contributing towards the benefit of the club, right? So we're not necessarily for profit, but we're all in it as a community together. And when these three things are present, you generally find healthy, flourishing people that are in a good state of being. And when they're absent, self-determination theory suggests there are consequences for well-being, negative consequences for well-being. So think about the workplace. Think about your work. Is it does it lend itself towards uh, your own autonomy? Do managers trust you? Do the business owners trust you to do the work that you're doing? Do they provide you with uh, the capacity to learn, or the opportunities to learn and to grow and develop? Um, if they don't, chances are you're kind of fighting a little bit in that situation. Um, so autonomy, competence, and relatedness, is everybody in it together, or are everyone looking out for their own back? In a highly competitive workplace, what tends to happen is people will cut each other up, or they look after themselves first, and in the end, it doesn't benefit towards the well-being of the organization, because everybody's in fear of being sacked. And currently, you might have heard the story a couple of months ago. Meta, for example, decided that they were going to implement an initiative where those on the bottom 5%, I think it was, maybe even 10% of the workforce in terms of performance, if you weren't up to scratch, you were out the door. And only recently, actually, I was working with a client who found themselves in that exact situation. They were worried, concerned, anxious, uptight about their career because they saw their friends being sacked. They were at the bottom 5 or 10% of the workforce inside Meta. So it has a detrimental impact on the behavior and performance of people in the workplace when you have that type of environment. On the other hand, if you have a growth oriented culture in an organization, if you have leadership that value your contribution, if they want to hear what you have to say, if everybody is in it for everyone else and supporting each other, the whole organization can lift, can experience a lift. But it's kind of a bit of a dichotomous situation, because you have a top down hierarchical system within most businesses, within most corporate environments, whereby there's a body or two at the top, maybe five or six, maybe more than that, maybe 10, doesn't matter. But you have this room full of bosses, and they decide what everyone else does pretty much. Uh, we come in and we work for these guys, and mostly blokes, right? Sometimes women. But it's top down. They tell everyone else what to do. They decide what the business does, and they reap all the rewards and so forth. Um, but if you look at a community setup, where the leadership is flatter, you have a more of a collectivist notion at work, or philosophy at work, where everybody is helping everybody else. And traditionally, that's how human beings interacted. That's how we built communities. That's how we got things done, how we supported one another. And I think that's a situation we need to try to get back to. However, I digress a little bit. So those three components again of flourishing well-being, of true intrinsic motivation, are autonomy. You feel you have some power and control over the work you do. Competence, you have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to get it done, or you can learn them. And then relatedness, the idea that we're all related to one another, and that we can support one another in the doing of that work. And when those three components are absent, there are negative consequences for well-being. Self-determination theory, Ed Deci and Richard Ryan, they also speak about um, this kind of forced motivation, or controlled motivation, is how they put it. So to be controlled, there are outside influences, extrinsics to you and me, that force or demand our compliance. And compared to intrinsic motivation, that internally motivated feeling, that sense of having control over work, this extrinsic motivation is very weak. So it's autonomous motivation that we're after. It's that something inside of us that compels us to do what it is we want to do. Children feel this autonomous motivation, and they just want to explore the world and check things out and put things in their mouth, and regardless of what happens, they just want to find out about the world. But as we get older, and the extrinsics within the world tend to have a bit of an overbearing influence over what we do and how we do it, and so on. So if you want to be motivated, if you want to know what motivates you, follow your curiosity. That's the message. Follow your impulses if you're brave enough. If you don't know what your impulses are, if you don't know what you love to do, so to speak, Well, there are ways of finding that out. I do it with clients a lot of the time, in career development and so on. Get in touch with me if you need some help with that. However, you can do it on your own. You'll know yourself. If you look at your hobbies, look at the world around you, your immediate environment, and what you surround yourself with. That's where your interests lie. And I think we'd be a much healthier society if more of us followed those impulses rather than doing what we think we should be doing. Um, we still got to earn a living, but in a later session, probably tomorrow or the next day, I can't remember which one, you'll find out why money does not motivate, despite what you might think. Okay, so in fact, I'll do that next because it's a nice follow on. Money doesn't motivate. Make sure you tune in to day 6 to find